Hello, 大家好. Today's guest is Felita. Felita's family is originally from China, and Felita was born and raised in Indonesia. She is currently studying in Beijing. Today, I'll ask a little bit about her childhood experience in Indonesia and her student life in China. Felita, can you briefly introduce yourself, please?
Hi everyone, hi listener. I'm Felita. I'm originally from Indonesia, Jakarta, but currently I'm studying. I'm a last year student in Beijing, China. It was nice talking to everyone. Feel free to ask.
Thank you. Are you studying for a bachelor's degree or master's degree?
Yeah, I'm studying for a bachelor degree in international trade and economics major.
And you said that you are from Jakarta, right? But your family is originally from China, right?
Yeah, my ancestors were in China, but I'm already the fifth generation, which is a long time ago. Yeah. But my whole family is from an island in Indonesia because Indonesia is thousands of islands and we're one of them. We're from Java Island. My grandma and my grandpa.
Probably you didn't have a chance to hear why the first generation has migrated to Indonesia from China, right? Because it's long time ago.
Yeah, I did my own research about the ancestors, where they came from, but I didn't know much from like my own grandparents because they also didn't know much about it.
I was wondering which language did you use within your family?
In my family, we use language that the Javanese people speak because we're from Java Island. We speak dialects like from Java Island. But me and my mom and my dad, we speak just the Indonesian language that everyone uses. It is just in my family, but usually the Chinese Indonesian in Indonesia, they use a lot of dialects. We don't use Mandarin, the Chinese Mandarin, but mostly we use like Chinese Hokkien, Hakka, Ke, Teochew, which is all the dialects from like the southern part of China. Because most of the immigrants are from the southern part of the China, like Fujian, Guangdong province, and there's some people also from like the northern part, but there's not a lot. Mostly are from the southern part.
At university, do you study in Chinese or in English?
I study in Chinese. I take my major in Chinese because I have a scholarship, and the scholarship at that time, I wanted to do it, like the whole major, I wanted to do it in Chinese because I heard that it's easier to get a scholarship if you do it in Chinese. And plus, I think if you wanted to do like a full degree of scholarship, I think for bachelor degree, they only provide the Chinese, not the English.
So that means, I guess you had to study Mandarin Chinese?
Yeah, I have to relearn it because my whole family, neither of them speak Chinese, none of them. So I have to relearn everything by myself.
I see. When did you start relearning Chinese then?
I started learning Chinese pretty early, like when I was in middle school, because I go to a school that teaches Chinese a lot. Because I think Chinese language is not something that you could learn in like 1 or 2 years. It takes quite a few years for you to learn Chinese until you get fluent.
So that means you had a chance to learn reading, writing, and also listening, and you also had a chance to practice your speaking while you were a student back in Indonesia.
Yeah. Because most Chinese Indonesian, they don't speak Chinese, right? Their parents encourage them to learn Chinese at a very young age to get back to the roots. Because on the 90s, specifically 1998, at that time, the Chinese Indonesian, they couldn't learn their dialects, they couldn't learn Chinese properly, and they have to change their name, they have to change their identity. So at that time, our parents' generation couldn't really learn about their roots. So that's why, and our generation, our parents encourage us to learn more about the roots where our ancestors came from.
Now in the Indonesia, there are schools where the Chinese teacher teach in Chinese.
Yeah. There's a lot of schools in Indonesia where they encourage us to learn Chinese. So they had like a Chinese language program.
Hearing about that, it seems like the situation has been changing in Indonesia.
Yes, exactly. A lot has changed.
Probably the China's influence is getting bigger because China is growing over the year, I guess.
Yes, I think since China it's kind of become a trend right now. I think all over the world, everyone is saying that they're in their most China era of their life. I think it's also because China has now grown their like power economically globally. So not like back in the days where maybe I think a lot of people relate to this, where people kind of mock this Chinese people or this Chinese descendants. But now I think whenever you see Chinese on the streets, they're kind of like, oh, these people are getting stronger and more powerful. They wouldn't do something to us. So yeah.
Growing up in Indonesia, probably a lot of people look different from your appearance, right? So people realize that your ancestor came from somewhere different. So how did the people around you used to treat you?
I think in my generation, we are more well treated than my parents' generation. A little bit of history background. The Chinese people immigrated to Indonesia way long than my grandma and my grandpa's generation. The Chinese immigrated to Indonesia on around the 13th century until the early 17th century. At that time, it was because of the Silk Road. And at that time, so we have a thing we call Peranakan, which is the Chinese and the local Indonesians assimilation. So they get married and they have a child. That's what we call Peranakan. And Peranakan is actually quite wide, not only in Indonesia. There's also a Peranakan in Singapore, Peranakan in Indonesia, Peranakan in Malaysia, all Southeast Asia. We call it Peranakan, which is the assimilation of Chinese people and the local. And then another history background on the 17th until 20th history. In Indonesia, it was the Dutch colonial era. At that time, the Dutch people from the Netherlands, they colonized us. After that, the Japanese colonized us. At that time, they need Chinese people in Indonesia as the middleman, which is as the tax collectors, the craftsmen, the laborers, because at that time, Indonesia has a lot of resources, natural resources. But us, Indonesia, we couldn't sell them to the Dutch people. So at that time, we need the Chinese people as the one who sell this thing to the Dutch. And then on the 19th and the 20th century, which is the recent one, there's a lot of Chinese people also immigrated to Indonesia because at that time, China was not in a stable condition, like economically. Also because after what happened to mainland China, because at that time, the European people came and they also colonized the Chinese people. So there's a large amount of Chinese people immigrated. So yeah, that's just a little bit of the history background. But go back to your question. No, I didn't have any like discrimination or I didn't get a lot of bad eyesight from people. But in my parents' generation, yeah, they experienced a lot of bad experience as a Chinese Indonesian. But in my generation, it keeps getting better. So for me, no, I didn't get a lot of racism or discrimination in my own country. But still, maybe because of my parents' trauma back in the days, whenever I go out, they will ask me to be careful, to be more mindful whenever I'm going out, especially I'm a girl and I'm a Chinese Indonesian. I look like Chinese in my own country, so I gotta be more careful.
How did your family maintain the Chinese traditions or customs at home?
So in my family, we still celebrate all the Chinese celebrations like 端午节, which is the one that we're gonna celebrate. And we also celebrate the Chinese New Year every year as usual. My family still celebrate the Chinese celebration, which is like the Chinese New Year every year. And also some of my family died. We still celebrate 清明节, which is the celebration that we celebrate to the people, the ancestors that has passed away. We also celebrate this in Chinese tradition. And also some of my family, not my main family, but some of my family still speak the dialect that we speak because my family originally immigrated from Fujian, which is the southern part of China as well. And some of our families still speak Hokkien, the Hokkien dialect. That's how we maintain our roots.
How about the food that you eat at home? Is it more Chinese or more local?
My grandma, she still cook a lot of Chinese traditional foods, and she taught my mom, and my mom teaches it to our generation. So we still eat Chinese food. And also in Indonesia, there's a lot of Chinatown. So there's a lot of Chinese food as well. My mom still educate us. My mom, when I was little, my mom used to like, this is called Tangyuan. You eat this, blah, blah, blah celebration. This is Fuyong Hai. Fuyong Hai is another food from Fujian, from China. So yeah, we still eat a lot of Chinese food. But my grandma and my mom also cook a lot of Indonesian local dishes. So both, we understand both.
Also, your family had a hard time living in Indonesia, but they still have a good pride that they are Chinese in their heart.
Exactly.
Did your parents also encourage you to be proud being Chinese?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, it's not like... I think this happens to a lot of Chinese Indonesian that they don't feel like they're Chinese enough, but they don't feel like they're Indonesian local enough. So we're kind of like in the middle. And my parents have always taught me to be just embrace who I am, which is I'm in the middle. I think this also happens to a lot of people that are like immigrant parents. I think they kind of have like this complicated feelings of having immigrant parents, which is they're not local enough for the locals. They're not Chinese enough for the Chinese. So kind of in the middle. Yeah. But my parents have always embraced our identity as Chinese Indonesia.
So when you were younger, have you faced into an identity crisis?
I think not. I think when I was kid, not really, because I go to a Chinese Indonesian school. I mean, it's not particularly Chinese Indonesian, but in that school, mostly are Chinese Indonesian. So I feel like I'm normal. But as I grew older and then I go to China, I met a lot of Indonesian local people that I haven't met in most of my life. It was pretty eye-opening for me because I haven't met these local people more until I go to China. So it was pretty interesting. When I came to China, I met a lot of Indonesian people, like a lot of Muslim Indonesian people. And I was like, it was pretty new to me. It was pretty fresh to me because in my whole life, I go to Chinese Indonesian school. So everyone that I see is just like me. And I think I'm the normal one. I'm just normal.
And then now you are in China, then most of the people around you look like you. But those who have same passport as you actually has a different appearance, right?
Yeah. And it was pretty new. It was pretty fresh. Not that I haven't met them in Indonesia, but it's more like my friend around me is started become more local. Yeah.
So that means there are quite a lot of Chinese Indonesians around you since childhood.
Yeah.
And when did you start thinking of coming to China?
For me personally, I've been wanting to come to China since I was in middle school because at that time, I really loved learning Chinese. At that time, most of my classmates, they don't really enjoy learning Chinese because of obviously Mandarin, it's very difficult. But for me, I've been finding out that Chinese is very interesting and I feel like I wanted to learn more about my roots. And I think most of my friends know me as someone that is very passionate about learning Chinese history because back in the days before China was kind of like the new trend, I've been eager to learn about Chinese history way before high school. So that has become my dream. I mean, back in the days, people, they have this American dream, but for me, I have this Chinese dream. I've been wanting to come to China.
Then when you told your parents that you want to go to China after you graduated from high school, how did they react?
For my mom, she was pretty supportive, but for my dad, he has more concern because at that time, when I applied to China, it was during COVID era. It was 2019, 2020 something. And I think my dad's reaction, he has more concern because at that time, I mean, I understand him. He has a lot of questions like, why would you even go to China? It was COVID. It was kind of dangerous. What about the virus and everything? Which is understandable. So that's how they react. I mean, my mom was like, yeah, you could go to China, but at the same time, just take care of your safety because it was COVID. And at that time, I think on my first year, I do it fully online because I couldn't go to China at that time. It was still lockdown era.
And then after the lockdown is finished, you came to China.
Yeah, after that, my second year, I go to Beijing.
You chose Beijing, right, for the place of study. Why did you choose Beijing?
At the time, I just wanted to experience the life of living in the bigger city, bigger opportunity. And I chose Beijing because Beijing is the capital city. And obviously, I get more opportunity after I came to Beijing, because the thing is that in Beijing, there's a lot of embassy, also Indonesian embassy in Beijing. And in that way, I get a lot of opportunity. Like whenever, let's say, there's a Indonesian president visiting in China, and then the Indonesian students or Indonesian worker in Beijing, we get opportunity to meet our president in China. And it only happens in Beijing. It only happens if you study or work in Beijing, because we have the Indonesian embassy in Beijing, right? And also in Beijing, it was capital city, of course. I get to see more of the China's faces that I couldn't see in other cities. Because I think I feel more of the Chinese people's patriotism in Beijing.
What was your first impression of the city after you moved to Beijing?
My first impression was like, wow, Beijing is kind of huge. It is very huge, and it's very, the people here, you can feel the patriotism, like how, I think in other cities, like maybe like Shanghai, you rarely, I don't know, but you rarely see people more like patriotism. I think in Shanghai it's more international, but in Beijing, you can see a lot of elder people, like a lot of older people, they're like, I love China, like more historical places. And because it's the political city, so you see more of the political side, like whenever there's controversial between the China and the US, and then you see all over the streets people in Beijing are talking about it. So, and also one thing that a lot of people talking about Beijing is that Beijing is huge, like huge, very, very huge. Like you go from one place to another place, it took you at least 1.5 hours, like for at least. It is very huge. Last time I went to another city in Shanghai, or I went to like Suzhou, it was quite shocking for me because one place to another, it only take me like half hour. But in Beijing, you could at least like half an hour if you go by like a public transportation.
Oh, wow.
So Beijing is very huge, very, very huge.
When the local people is talking to you, did they instantly realize that you were from another place?
Oh, of course not. They will started speaking to me in like Chinese, in like full speed of Chinese. I think because my Chinese is pretty good, so they couldn't realize that I'm not from China. Maybe they would just assume that I'm from the southern part of China, and also because I have a little bit of Taiwanese accent, because maybe my family is from Fujian and they speak kind of the same language, which is Hokkien, and I kind of have that Taiwanese accent. They probably would assume that I'm from Taiwan. But whenever I speak Indonesian, they would started asking questions. Oh, where are you from? Why are you speaking so fast? Are you from Xinjiang? Where are you from? I was like, no, I'm not Chinese. I'm sorry. But yeah, I speak Chinese. But they would assume that I'm from Xinjiang, which is the other part of China.
So they never think that you are from different country until you tell them.
Yeah, until I tell them. But usually whenever I speak in Indonesian with my Indonesian friend, maybe like in a taxi, they would assume that I'm from Xinjiang, because in Indonesian language, we have a lot of pronunciation like like and in China, apparently, Chinese people, they couldn't pronounce the so whenever I speak a lot of they would think that I'm from Xinjiang. And also because Indonesian, the majority is Muslim, we have a lot of saying like Assalamualaikum, Waalaikumsalam, which is also, that's how they say Ni Hao in Xinjiang. So that's why people think that I'm from Xinjiang, which is not.
And when you tell them that you are actually from Indonesian and you have a Chinese background, how do people usually react?
They would react like, oh yeah, I've heard about it. These Chinese people would started asking like thousands of questions about like, how is it life in Indonesia? How do Indonesian people see you and stuff like that?
Do they still treat the same as the different people, the different local people to you?
It's pretty the same. I think it's just they're more curious about my background because, I mean, they see me, I look like Chinese, but why do I speak different language? And they were just curious about me, and I find it pretty fun. I mean, especially like whenever I'm in the open public area or I'm in taxi, and then this taxi driver just curious asking about my background.
Then the opposite side, you looking at the local Chinese people in China, what kind of differences do you see between you Chinese Indonesian and then the local Chinese people?
Ooh, I think that's quite a lot of differences that I see as I stayed in here. But I think the most significant one is that how we work, like how we do things. I think because Chinese people, their whole life, they're kind of like, I think there's like a very huge difference in our lifestyle as well. Like these Chinese people, their whole life, they've been studying, like, for example, as a kid, they've been studying for the Cao, which is the final exam to enter the university. So in their whole life, they've been working very, very hard. But maybe Indonesian, we're more like relaxed, we're more like laid back. Even though we also study hard, but I think not as hard as the Chinese. I think it's also has something related to the history, because back in the days, Chinese people, they have really hard life of just surviving. So I think it's kind of like has been rooted in their own soul, which is they have to work so hard just to survive. But in Indonesia, it was kind of different. So okay, I will take an example. For me as a student, when I study in Beijing, let's say there's a group project. Maybe for us international student, if the deadline is due at 15, we're gonna do it on like 14, like the day before. But what I notice for Chinese student is that whenever I work with my Chinese classmate, they would finish everything like 1 month or like 1 week before the deadline. So it was kind of like a huge difference. And I think I noticed it's not only the Chinese people, I think it's also happened to like some of my Japanese and my Korean classmates. The Korean, Japanese, and the Chinese people, they work very hard, and it was kind of, I think, the culture that they work hard. And also it was pretty interesting in Southeast Asia, in like Singapore, Malaysia, and in Indonesia, we have terms. We call it kiasu, which is like this Chinese people kiasu, which is Chinese people work very hard. Yeah. But there's a lot of differences in the culture, in how we see things in life, in how we perceive on work. I think Chinese people are more hardworking than Indonesian. I think it also has the correlation with the history.
And then because there are so many people in China, the China's population is huge. The competition is really hard as well.
Yes, the competition is very hard.
In that way, probably you can more easily understand how other Indonesians feel or think when you are in China, I guess.
Yeah, because I'm in the middle, so I understand both, like China perspective and Indonesia perspective.
On the other hand, what aspect of Chinese culture do you feel closest to?
Maybe after I arrive in China, I don't have a lot of culture shocks, because back in Indonesia, I still celebrate a lot of Chinese celebrations. So I don't have that much culture shock. So I think I lean more into the Chinese culture than the local Indonesian culture. So I understand more of the Chinese culture than my Indonesian local, which is I'm trying to understand both culture. Yeah, but I think I'm leaning more into the Chinese culture.
Do you also have a sense that you could blend into the local culture after you started living in China?
After I moved to China, I learned more of Indonesian culture from my friends, because sometimes we were like having a dinner or a lunch together, and then we were talking about, and then in Indonesia, usually people are like this, like that. I was like, oh, really? I didn't know about that. So I learned a lot from my friends, like local Indonesian friends. They kind of taught us, oh, in Indonesia back in the days on childhood, it was like this. I was like, oh yeah, I didn't know about that, because my family was Chinese. So I don't have that much of a thing that we do. So yeah, I learned a lot from my friends about my Indonesian local culture.
You also mentioned that the Chinese people study so hard, right? Because the competition is really hard. How do you see the difference of using your spare time between you or other Indonesian people and then the local Chinese people?
For my spare time, for me personally, I like to travel. And since I already came to China, I travel a lot to a lot of Chinese cities. I wanted to see more China part that the media doesn't show us. And also, I like to learn a lot of like the businesses, how they do in China. I like to listen to podcasts. I like to watch Chinese variety shows. Well, basically, I like to learn more about China. So in my spare time, I usually watch like a lot of Chinese dramas, Chinese variety shows. I travel to all of other cities in China. Yeah.
It seems like you use your time not only for studying, but you use it for something different as well.
Of course.
I heard that the Chinese students, they are studying all the time. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. Because my major is in Chinese, I go to the same class as these Chinese people. And there's one time I was talking to one of my Chinese friends. We were like comparing our program. I mean, we're in the same major, but we have different program, obviously, because my program is for the international student and her program is for the Chinese student. And when we compare our program, I was like in shock because our program was so different. As for me, I only need like 130 credits until I graduate. But for them, they need 150 credits until they graduate, which means like in a week, let's say I have 8 classes, but for them, they have like maybe 13 classes or 14, 15 classes. So I was like, wow, that's quite a lot of differences. So when me and my international friends, when we got back from classes, the Chinese students still stay in the class for the next class. But me, we already go back to our dorm. So I was in shock because even the program that was made for us and for the Chinese student, it was quite different. They have more classes than us.
No wonder they are busier.
They're busier and the standards are higher for them. We also have, it was mandatory to take a sport exam. Either you're Chinese, either you're international student, but for all university in China, it is mandatory. You have to take a Chinese exam. And for us international student, a lot of us are not used to doing sport. And at that time, I find it hard to do this sport exam. And it's not just me. There's a lot of international students say the same thing as well. The sport is kind of hard. For us, we have to run like 800 meters. But for the Chinese student, they have to run at least 1 kilometers to 1.5 kilometers. Like you see the standards in here, it was just a lot of standards that is different made for international and the Chinese.
Oh, wow. I'm not sure why those different has been built.
Yeah, there's a lot of differences in here.
Seems like the local people has more pressures.
Yeah, they have more pressure.
You just mentioned that you have also traveled to many other places, right, besides Beijing. So what surprised you the most while doing life in China?
While traveling in China, I was pretty shocked that I've seen a lot of more Chinese ethnic minority, because I think whenever like the Western media or just international media, they just show you like one part of China, like the Han ethnicity. But actually, if you dive in deeply, I think there's a lot of Chinese minority in China itself. There's like the Uyghur, the Thai ethnicity, the Miao ethnicity, there's like thousands of hundreds of thousands ethnicity in China, and it's quite shocking. And also I've traveled not only to big cities but also to the rural part area of China, like the village area, and it's quite shocking to me because whenever we're talking about village, I think if we're talking in Indonesia, the village it's not advanced enough, and the road and the hospitality is not as good as China. Because in China, whenever you go to the village area, it was quite eye-opening for me, because even in the village, the hospitality is pretty nice, and it's pretty fascinating for me. China has changed this village as a travel and tourism aspect. So whenever you travel to the village area in China, it was very clean. It was quite shocking for me. It was very clean, and they has already turned this China village as a tourism part of China.
I also heard that even if you go to a rural area, the internet is everywhere, so that you can use your mobile and you can do everything with your phone. Is that right?
Yeah, that is right. I just got back from Guilin and I went to a small village over there. It was pretty fascinating because they have a lot of natural resources and they maintain the resources as natural as possible, but at the same time, they make it as a travel and tourism. So they really did great for the village.
Does it happen to the same in Indonesia? If you go to a smaller town or rural area in Indonesia, do they still have a stable internet, or similar environment?
No, I think it depends, but if you go to like smaller area in Indonesia, the internet is not stable enough because my dad, he came from a small island in Indonesia as well. And when we were little, we used to go there like back and forth to Jakarta and to that island. And in that island, they don't have enough stable connection.
In that way, probably you also felt the much difference from your country, I guess.
Yes, a lot.
I see that Indonesia and China has a lot of many differences between two countries. Are there any other things that you surprised after you started doing life in China?
Oh, there's one, which is the people. I think I'm quite shocked because, fun fact, Indonesia has been nominated as the world's most friendly people. So whenever you come to Indonesia, you will see people in Indonesia smiling. They were like, "Hi, how are you? How's everything going on?" We were just very smiley and friendly. But when I arrived to China, I was pretty shocking for me. I have this culture shock, but it is especially because I live in Beijing. I think people in Beijing, they're more like straightforward, and the way they speak, it's kind of like rude, but they don't mean to be rude. I think it's just because of the language barrier. But when I arrived in Beijing, a lot of international people, a lot of international students around me, they said that Beijing people, they sounds rude. They sounds like they're not interested talking in you. But actually, when I stayed here for like quite a long time, I realized that it's not they're rude. It's just how they speak. They sound rude, but they're not actually rude. But when I first came here, I was like, whoa, why are they sound so rude to me? Like whenever I arrive at the taxi, they were like, "Chinar." Like I was like, okay. They were like, "Chinar, come on." I was like, okay. But they're not actually rude. I think it's just how they sound. But Indonesian people, whenever you came to Indonesia, people are like, "Hi, how are you?" And when I arrive in Beijing, they don't ask this question. They're like, "So where are you going? What are you gonna do?" Like, it sounds very different.
I also have a friends from Indonesia, and then whenever I listen to them talking to each other in Indonesia, it sounds very soft and mild.
Yeah, and also Indonesian speaks very fast. A lot of people said that we speak like, whenever we speak Indonesia, we speak very fast. We're like, so fast.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, if you notice, because whenever I speak in Indonesia with my friend in China, they were like, "Wow, 你说得好快." You speak very fast.
But you didn't even try, like you just speak naturally and then it became fast, right?
Yeah, we just speak naturally, but we just speak very fast.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Next question. How has your way of seeing China changed after you started living there?
For me personally, I think after I actually arrived in China, it's more eye-opening to me because I get to see like the technologies in here and all the parts of China that the international media didn't show to me. But actually in general, I don't feel a lot of culture shock because I grew up in Chinese culture as well. But I think the one that changed my perspective more is just back in Indonesia. I think that China is just a traditional old country, but now I see it more as a traditional yet also an advanced and a like very high in technology country. So I think, but there's not much of a differences as for me personally.
A lot of information that you already have got before you came here.
Yes, exactly.
What does home mean to you?
Home for me is a place where I feel the most comfortable as a personal being. For me, even though my ancestors came from China, but I don't see China as my home. I still see Indonesia as my home, and I feel the most comfortable in Indonesia. Even though I like China a lot, I see China as just a country that I am eager to learn. That I see China as an advanced country, but I don't see China as my home. I see Indonesia as my home. I just see China as a place for me to grow, but not as a home.
So after graduation, would you like to stay in China or would you like to go back to Indonesia or go somewhere else?
For me personally, I would like to go to Indonesia. I would like go back to Indonesia because that's the place that I feel most comfortable at. Even though there's quite a lot of controversial right now in Indonesia because most Indonesians don't feel satisfied with our government and anything, but still at the same time, as Indonesian, we still love our country so much. So I still feel most comfortable and I still want to go back to Indonesia and work in Indonesia and do businesses in Indonesia because that's where I came from.
And then probably you might want to do something related to China.
Yes, exactly.
So that in that way you can fully use your background and all the skills and experience that you gained and learned.
Yes, exactly. True.
I think not only Indonesian Chinese people, but I also see that lots of Japanese people are having hard time to understand more about the Chinese people, and other international people probably has a lot of misunderstanding, misconception towards China or Chinese people. But because you grew up standing kind of between and you understand both the culture, so in that way, how would you encourage the people who are standing on each side to understand more about each other?
Yeah, this is the thing, which is I think you don't have to force people to understand you because people will naturally, automatically want it to understand you when there's a real proof. Because back in the days, however, us, the Chinese Indonesian, trying to prove ourselves that we're Indonesian, these local Indonesian people, they wouldn't listen to you. But now, you have a real proof, which is now China has become the economic global power. You don't have to prove to people, like, you don't have to force people, like, you have to understand us. But just proving to them that we have the real proof, like now, China have a real proof. Now the technologies, the AI, the economic are from China. People will naturally wanted to understand you. So for me, if there's a misunderstanding, you don't have to try to prove yourself. Just let the real result prove themselves by its own. Just like how China do right now. They're not trying to get the validation or trying to prove themselves that, oh, like, look at us. No, they're not doing that. They're just like doing on themselves. They're just getting better and better each day. And people will naturally want to work with Chinese people because they see now China as a global economic power.
Wow, I think that's a very powerful, encouraging word. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure.
And thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're welcome. And also thank you for the time.